welcome back to the Ag Bull Podcast. We're trying something new today. I'm at my home office, and I called a friend who's at his office. We're using a new software, and we're going to try podcasting remotely with someone who's really good at podcasting. Today we have the water table on, Mr. Jamie Duininck from Prinsco, and he is a interesting fella who I met. That's probably going to have to be, that fella noise probably going to have to be edited. But he's a really great guy with an interesting podcast, and we're going to talk about his podcast, The Water Table. And of course, I am Tom Grisafi from Ag Bull Media, and I think anyone involved in agriculture, and we're all involved in water. If you think you need a farmer for 3 meals a day, try and go in without water. So we're either trying to control water, get rid of water, something with water. Jamie's going to tell us all about it. I have to say I found it fascinating a few years ago when he told me he was starting a podcast called The Water Table. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tommy, thanks for having me. Fun to be on the Ag Bowl and to chat a little bit about water and kind of our history of how we've gotten to know each other through the years. And it'll be fun. It'll be fun just to talk about what's going on out there on a cold winter day.
Yeah, real quick on the check, can your folks hear us okay? And I hear you guys fine. Is everything going well?
We're good on this end, yep.
Let's talk real quick. I have a question for you. The first time I heard about your podcast, we were at the Big Iron Farm Show a few years ago. This was maybe before COVID or right during. It might have losing track. When did you start the Water Table?
Yeah, so we've been right at a little bit more than 2 years. It was like October of 2 years ago. So it probably was, that I think 2020. Let's see, the Big Iron is usually in September, so it probably was at that September, and we started it in October of that year.
Yeah, we were at the 50th anniversary brunch in maybe at one of the hotels for Ellingson, and you were like giddy, like little school kid. Yeah, all the equipment came in. You should see this. I'm like, what could this guy be doing? And I have to say, I'm impressed. I've taken some pointers off your website. I kind of made my website look like your website, or maybe every podcast website looks like that. I don't know. But yours is very informative, and it's been fun. I would say I've listened to maybe a fourth of your podcast. I do enjoy them. I listened to one the other day with your wife. You were right. She's much better looking than you and much smarter than you, of course, too. And
yeah, both are true.
Both are true. She knew her stuff, so her knowledge in real estate was high. Her judgment in taking someone ice fishing maybe isn't the best. I heard we had an accident yesterday, but you could tell us more.
Yeah, we had a little. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. You know, the one thing that I find interesting, I remember most of the times, like remember first time I met you, and I kind of, pretty dynamic guy, and who's this guy? I wanted to get to know you, and then ran into you on the street at Commodity Classic, and that was right before COVID, like the 3-4 weeks before, and February of 2020. But the one thing I don't remember, which I'm kind of thankful for, is when you're just telling me I acted like a little schoolgirl. That's not me.
No,
so
you were excited, which is interesting because most people aren't excited about what they're doing. I think a lot of America just goes to work, whether they own their own company or not. I think we're losing the entrepreneurial spirit, and the fact that you already have a successful company, and you could tell us what that is, and that you're branching out into newer things. I think we're the same age. I'm probably real close to getting my AARP card or something when I turn 50, but some people, it's awkward to hear your own voice. It's awkward to film yourself, but I've watched your show, and as things progress from audio to video to, hey, we need to film vertical so we could do Instagram Reels and TikTok, and in the whole world of TikTok. It's funny, speaking of TikTok, I sent you a TikTok that had your tile in it, and I go, look at this. Someone thinks tile's a good idea. And you're like, that is my tile. What
Yeah.
It's fascinating. What gave you the idea to start the Water Table, Jamie?
It's an interesting conversation and kind of fun to talk about because some of the things you already said is not something I ever saw myself doing, not really me, but I have enjoyed it immensely. It's been really fun to connect with with old friends. I've done, a fair amount of podcasts just on relationships that people I've connected with during my life. Some of them from 25 years ago when I first started in the industry, and then a lot and what the whole podcast was. The reason for it was around education. And so to answer your question, I had some people that I trust a lot that I work with and that do some marketing for Prinsco, which is our company, that were just telling me, we should really do a podcast. You have a lot of things to talk about and a lot of connections that can tell a story and can educate people. Because as I was talking to them over the years, a lot of the reasons I wanted, that a lot of my frustration was around our city cousins. We're out here living in rural America, even some of my own family members that just didn't understand what we do with managing water and agriculture, or really managing water anywhere. I mean, we do storm sewer, we have other markets, but the water table is specifically talking about managing water in the agricultural environment. And it's so misunderstood, and that's why we wanted to do that. That's why they pushed me to do it. I'm really thankful they did, because I've enjoyed it way more than I thought I would, just connecting with people. I'm learning every episode. I'm learning something, which is fun. I like to be a continuous learner, and also I'm able to just share what the things that I've learned somewhat through osmosis over just talking to our own people and people that work at Prinsco and contractors that have been around much longer than me and have a lot more to offer than I do. But if I can share some of that insight and others can learn from it, it's great. I enjoy it.
Real quick, I was looking at your website, and I understand that a lot of the time you're up in Minnesota, but you have a lot of offices. Are they locations where tile is delivered to or warehoused, and then give us the logistics.
So we manufacture. Prinsco manufactures pipe in 8 locations. So it's actually made, and most of those are in the Midwest. And then we also have some distribution sites beyond that in areas where we do a lot of business or that are hard to get to. On the West Coast, we have 2 manufacturing plants, one in Oregon, one in California. And most of the stuff that happens out there is more commercial storm sewer application, not necessarily agriculture application. We do have a significant agricultural business in the state of Oregon that's managing water on all kinds of different crops, which is fun. In the Midwest, it's all commodity crops, corn and soybeans for the most part. Out there, they might be draining a strawberry field. A lot of wineries that are using our product to build a better, or to grow a better grape. So that's kind of a neat story to get involved in something different than just the commodity crops. But then we have plants, besides the West Coast, all over the Midwest, and North Dakota, in Fargo, and in South Dakota. Here in central Minnesota, Princeburg, Minnesota is our flagship plant where we started. That's where it all began. And then we have
by your
grandpa
or your dad?
So it was, I'm a 3rd generation family member, and it would have been my dad's generation. There was 3 partners in the first generation, one which would be my grandfather and his 2 brothers. And out of that, there was 6 partners in the second generation. One of them was my father and his brothers and cousins. And then in my generation now, there's 8 of us, of which I have a brother and I have 6 other cousins that are involved in the business. And then we have a 4th generation that's starting now also, that we have a couple of 4th generation members working in the business. I think 3 of them now, maybe 4, that are, anywhere between 30 and mid-20s.
Are you comfortable
so it's exciting
telling people how many great, awesome jobs you're contributing to employment numbers?
Yeah, at Prinsco, we have, our family business is more than just Prinsco. We're also in the construction business, and we have a construction business here in central Minnesota that works kind of western central Minnesota and the Dakotas, little bit of northern Iowa. We have a construction business in North Texas, and then Prinsco. Those are kind of our larger businesses, along with a ready mix company. We deliver concrete ready mix more locally here through 12 or 13 locations in central Minnesota. But so, enterprise wide, I'm not exactly sure, but in between 1,000 and 1,200 employees, and Prinsco is around 500.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a lot of, and hopefully it's going better than Southwest went the last few days. Now, you weren't familiar with the Southwest Airlines debacle, but I could tell you there'll be some college courses written on what not to do on a Christmas weekend. Just to give you a little update.
For sure.
There are people stuck at airports that Southwest says they can't get a flight for them for 6 to 7 days.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, I actually had heard nothing about it because I just didn't pay attention to the media here we're recording this. I don't know when you're going to share this, but we're recording it just a couple days after Christmas here. But today I heard one of our employees that's our West Coast manager, was flying back to the Midwest and was stuck in Phoenix for Christmas Eve. So he spent, which kind of bummed me out because he's just moved out there in the last year and, wanted to get home to some family. And now he was stuck he's home now. So he did get home, but was stuck spending Christmas Eve in Phoenix, which, sounds bad to everyone. But if you don't travel for your job and for a living, right, you don't know how. There's a lot of challenges with that. I've been there, done that. I think you have too.
That would a little bit. Logistically, since we're talking about a debacle in logistics, let's talk about to make pipe. What's the little plastic beads that went crazy? Give us a short version of that story.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's
another.
I'm going to tell you a couple things.
Logistics thing that caught you. That was your version of a black swan, right?
For sure. And I'll tell you a little bit of a couple different stories on that. So we manufacture, especially in the ag market, it's high-density polyethylene, or HDPE product. That's what all of the agricultural the small diameter, the 4-inch, the coils that go in the field, the mains, the 12, 15, 18-inch mains. There also is a product that's a polypropylene, or PP is the acronym for that, that is used in our industry, but much more dominant in storm sewer, where that's used, and some in agricultural mains. But I'd say less than 5% of the pipe that goes into agriculture is polypropylene. It's mostly polyethylene. We manufacture a lot of that with recycled plastic. You can use virgin. We've perfected our use in recycle. I've done some podcasts on that. We have some competitors that promote virgin only, and I've done some podcasts that if people are interested, they should listen to, on why the use of recycled plastic is environmentally friendly, it's sustainable, but it also is, with how we've perfected that and how we do that, explain that. I won't get into that today, but how it is extremely consistent, and even more consistent than the virgin product that's used in our industry. If you use a virgin product for like a medical grade, you're making, syringes or something, something for your heart that's going to go in there, has to be very precise. That's called a prime virgin material. When the manufacturers of that material are getting to a prime material, as they're getting there, they make what's called wide spec virgin, and it isn't exactly the density and the melt that is prime. So it's somewhere in between, and they know it's somewhere in between this point and this point. That works good for pipe, and so our industry buys just tons of that wide spec virgin. When you're using recycle, and what Prinsco has proprietarily perfected is the use of that recycle, in which we can get even a more precise material than that wide spec virgin. So our ability to use that to have high quality pipe is one thing that makes us successful, and we're pretty excited about it. One thing I wanted to tell you about that, what happened last year and where you're going is, in 2021, in February of 2021, there was a weather event, very significant weather event in Texas, and people might remember that. I did a podcast on this also, but in which it got down to about 5 degrees and stayed there for 7 to 10 days throughout most of the state of Texas.
I didn't realize it was that long.
It was long, and it created really significant problems at these refineries. And power outages, but then burst pipes, water freezing in pipes, significant pipes, 24-inch and above, that are ductile iron pipe that, we were also going through shortages at the time, so it was hard to get this material. And there were refineries that all of them were down, obviously, during that cold spell. But then there were some that were down that had significant damage for up to 6 weeks. This caused a real delay. There was other things that happened. If you go back to right when COVID started and oil actually went below zero for a couple of days.
As a futures trader, I can tell you that's a true story.
Yeah.
It went to about negative 38, negative 39,
Yep. And what happened there was some panic that happened on the plastic side. On the plastic side, too. And they sold a whole bunch of product to China.
That's in your podcast. I listened to that.
Yep.
And this is fascinating because we had the product, right? And
we
sold it
we
to
had it.
Our nicest friends, China.
We sold it because we were worried about, what was going to happen. And then all of a sudden with these, with the government boosting up individuals and boosting up with the PPP loans, different things like that, all of a sudden there's a lot of money in our economy. People are doing things. The first we saw of that in our industry was really individuals. We got really busy with the product we sell through the retail chains and big boxes. People had $600, they had $1,200, whatever it was, in their pocket, and they had to stay home during that spring of 2020. What are we going to do? We're going to do a home improvement project. We're going to build redo our bathroom, or we're going to do some landscaping in our backyard. And that's where our product would come in, as, on the outside of doing some work in the backyard, whatever it is. But all of a sudden we got really busy. Now they've sold all that product to go ahead. So now we're kind of hand to mouth the rest of 2020. Going into 2021, they're like, okay, we're hitting the winter season. We're going to be able to catch up with our supply and demand. Then we get this storm. We're down for 6 weeks, and we're in a world of hurt. So 2021 for our industry was like we've never seen before. Our raw material prices went up, tripled in the matter of 30 to 60 days.
So something you'd pay 50 for is 150?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. And you couldn't get it either. So, the first part was, okay, you're going to pay triple what you paid 2 months ago. But the second part is, can we get it in time to, and how that ended up playing out, we were very fearful of that. But for the most part, we were able to get enough material. Some days it was, are we going to have enough next week? And it would show up kind of just in time. There was some challenges, but they weren't as far as getting enough and having to shut a line down here and there. But they were minimized compared to what we thought. It was more just on that raw material spiking that much.
How does this material come to you? Like, could you order a whole trainload of this, or is this semis from Texas to Minnesota?
Most of it in this case on the recycle comes through mostly truckload quantities. The virgin comes on train.
Okay.
Train cars.
It's like 20 cars come on a train, and they take them down a spur and send them your way. And
that's right.
And what's it look like when it comes in? Little.
So virgin is small pallets that look like probably not the appropriate way, but like a grain of rice type size.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And recycle is more. It can either be repalletized, which would look kind of the same, or it can be like a shredded plastic, so in flake material.
Real quick about this recycle. Is this tying into that whole ESG movement that some companies think is super cool and some aren't? Or is that, hey, we only use this plastic? Is that part of the ESG where hedge funds only invest in companies that are moving that way? Is that part of that?
It kind of was at the beginning, in lead credits and things that that whole movement continues to evolve. So it isn't really It absolutely, the lead thing has kind of moved into ESG now, and so yeah, there are companies that are promoting that as an ESG practice. We're not necessarily doing it. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and because we can do it really well. And it's, as I think our regulatory agencies continue to evolve and allow this now, just in I wasn't prepared for this question,
That's
but I think
okay.
it's 2020, maybe 2019, but not very long ago, we just got our first DOT spec in which the DOT is now allowing in certain applications a recycled product. It always used to have to be, the acronym was an AASHTO M294, which meant if you're going to do, if there's drainage that needs to be done on this state highway for the MnDOT or whatever it might be, but using Minnesota as an example, that it had to be AASHTO pipe that was made out of virgin plastic. Now they have an AASHTO R spec. The R stands for recycle. Not all the states have adopted that, but it's heading that direction. And so there will be more and more of this that comes up over time.
Okay. Would you say a couple of years ago, as CEO, was by far your most challenging getting through the pandemic for the safety and health of your workers and staff, and then supply chain issues? Does it? Can you see any bigger of a challenge, or was that it? Hopefully, that was the toughest mountain you'll ever climb.
That definitely, I'm sure there's things that are out there that we haven't experienced yet, but from what we've experienced and all of the unknowns at that time, and where we're going was a really, really interesting, and I think we've all learned a lot from that. And not sure I'd want to go through some of that again, but I am thankful and grateful that had that opportunity to go through that.
That's what leaders do, right?
Right,
I mean,
right. It was.
You can't turn to everyone else and say, you know what, I think I'm going to take this next few months off. This is a great time to hide here. So it's you really learn a lot about people when they're at their worst, when things are. You want to learn about a family member, walk into a hospital when someone's sick or dying, and you'll really learn what your family's like. Or I've seen it, and it's usually not a positive story. Although sometimes people rise up and say, "Here's what we're going to do." You don't have a problem if you have a plan, and we have a plan. But lives were lost, and a lot of wild things happen, and they're still wild. I mean, I just read today that we are now all flights coming in from China. We're now testing the Chinese. And so we've went to where we're not testing anyone in America. Now we're testing for COVID back for the Chinese as it's flaring up there. So I don't know that this is ever going to quite go away. It's interesting. And
and just the whole human resource, challenge with getting enough people and the right people to work that is caused, a lot of this by this whole COVID thing is we're still dealing with it, today. So
when you make
it'll
pipe,
be there
you
a long
can't
time.
tell everyone, hey, take your laptops home tomorrow. We're going to make pipe from home. Like, as a commodity broker and a trader, if I have a laptop, a nice screen, and a really great internet, I'm good to go anywhere in the world. If that voice over IP phone's working and those markets are flashing on my screens, I am good to go. But you're actually in a business where it's labor intensive, resource intensive. Everyone needs to be on the site and rolling, correct?
Correct, and 24 hours a day, which makes it, challenging in today's environment.
Let's talk about that.
It's pretty easy.
How challenging is it to hire someone? As I'm going to look down at my phone because I'm dying to see where the market's closed. I know they closed poorly, which is ironic because agriculture is just booming and the stock market's going to have a very bad year. But how challenging is the labor force right now for you?
Yeah, it's challenging. It's very challenging. It feels like it might be turning a little bit better right now, but that also would very much depend on, we work in many markets and we have plants in many markets. So some are better than others. One being where I met you was Fargo. Fargo is a real challenge just to find people that are available to work because everybody has a job and everybody, all the other companies are wanting to keep their employees. So wages have gone up significantly over the last couple of years. And, And I think it's a real testament to culture and you know, what kind of work environment do you have? Those that have a work environment where people want to be are not seeing the same challenges as far as having to replace people all the time as those that the environment is.
Let me ask you a question, Jamie. You're a smart guy. I know there's a ton of people listening, and to anyone listening, thank you for listening. And you might be able to watch this if Jamie and I don't botch this up. But a lot of people have never been to Fargo. And when I fly out of Chicago and go to Fargo, I really think people feel bad for me. And I land at Fargo Airport. I have a car that's sitting there waiting for me. My car, I park it in the cheap lot. I have a brand new apartment in downtown, 3 miles from the airport. How would you explain Fargo to someone who's never been there so they don't feel sorry for us? As my wife knows, she goes, you always have fun when you go up to Fargo. I'm like, I apologize. I live above a restaurant bar, and they're just friendly down there. I sometimes wander around downtown Fargo. How would you explain the environment? Because the work environment's on fire. I've never sat next to someone at a restaurant or a bar and they said, I can't get a job. If they can't get a job, that's a choice, not a problem.
Well, it's another question that I wasn't expecting, but I think I have
do
an
this all day. So
yeah, I kind of like it.
it.
I kind of like it, and for me, I live about 2 hours and 45 minutes southeast of Fargo, and and I didn't spend a lot of time in my life in Fargo. In fact, I don't even think I had been there until I started working. And probably in my 20s is the first time I ever went to Fargo. There really was no reason to. I'm less than 2 hours to Minneapolis. I had family in Sioux Falls, so those are the directions I went more than Fargo. But it's a really interesting place. I'm still not sold personally on the weather in Fargo because it's even from where I live, 160 miles to the southeast. It's quite a bit warmer here in the winter than it is there. It's 10, 15 degrees colder, and it's always windy and all that. So that part is a little bit challenging. But man, I love going to Fargo. Sioux Falls is a great town. They're similar from the standpoint of size. I think from the standpoint of culture and business climate, they're pretty similar. But Fargo really has a lot going on for itself. I am amazed when I go to Fargo and when I spend time there with people at the wealth that's in that community. There's a ton of wealth there, and a lot of it is self-made wealth of local people that started something either a generation ago or this generation and have just done really well for themselves. And then the technology community is pretty significant there. I think people would be really surprised by it. It's a great place, 9 months of the year. I'm not sure I could handle it, even though I'm kind of in the same environment. It's just far enough south, and we have a lot more trees here, so we don't have as much wind in those 3 months of the winter. But we all have, our spots that I don't think there's very many places I'd want to live 12 months of the year anyway. So that's my little take on Fargo. But I always like going there, and I've got a lot of friends there now. But I just am impressed almost every time I'm going there at what they're building there for a community and how it's going to continue to grow, and how I think about recruiting for our business and long term. And we have several people that have graduated from NDSU, 3 or 4 engineers that work in our company that have come out of the NDSU engineering program, and I just see that that'll continue as we'll continue to build a pipeline from there, because it's a great education that happens at NDSU, and I think there's a lot of more rural kids that end up there.
Ethic, right?
Very strong work ethic. They can understand our culture. That's who we are, and so Fargo will be a big part of Prinsco's future as we continue to.
You just
grow.
gave me my lead to your next question. Your culture. Explain what your culture is, because I understand that word. I work at a company that is pretty proud to say that they have a culture. It could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. I know you're going to spin it in a good thing, but what is your culture? What would you just your employees and coworkers are going to listen to this? What are things you need to work on? I mean, we could all say how great you are, and no, we need this, and we that, and we gave this, but what is your culture, and what do you need to improve? Because you are hiring 2 generations younger than us now to come up and work at this company 24 hours a day, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And, and it's a good question. I'm happy to answer it because it's important to us. And, we think there's always opportunities to improve, but we think our culture is good at Prinsco. Our mission is to care, contribute, and solve. That's who we are. It's who we want to be on a mission that we're caring, we're contributing, and we're solving problems for fellow employees, for our customers, for our industry, for the world, really. I mean, we can go down and say, if you want to get that granular, what we do is we feed the world. We make a pipe
You're
that...
in the bushel business?
Yeah, absolutely. We make a pipe that goes underground that takes care of some water issues for farmers and that allows them to grow a better crop that has more bushels, adds more bushels, which adds more income to their bottom line, which then they pay more taxes. Farmers hate taxes, but when you think about it a minute, let's talk about paying taxes. What does that do? We can get real granular and say some of our taxes go in for wasted applications. I'm not going to argue that, but what else do they do in local rural America? They build hospitals and schools and roads, and it builds just a stronger, more vibrant community. And getting off subject here a little bit, but my son just is a freshman at Texas A&M, and he said to me here, we're over Christmas break, he said, "Dad, some of these towns I've driven through in Texas that are, like Spicer, where I live, it's a couple thousand people, said they're just unbelievably poor, and they're just not like what I'm used to for a Midwest small town." And I said, that's because of the agricultural base we have here, and the wealth that comes out of the farm, which then builds all the things we talked about, the schools, and back into the community, and builds implements and builds, the offshoot businesses that have to be there to support the agriculture that's in the area. And that's why I like living where I live in rural America, but the Midwest rural America, is because there isn't much better than a small town that's healthy and vibrant. That is awesome. So back to our mission and our culture at Prinsco. Care, contribute, solve is our mission, and our values, which we talk about a lot at Prinsco, and I see them lived out all the time by our employees, are relationships, which we define relationships at Prinsco as people matter. Hard work, exceed expectations is how we decide that. And integrity. And integrity to us just means do what's right. And we've all heard about, companies like Enron talking about integrity, but it's fun to watch our employees use these values with their fellow employees. And they're talking about them like, hey, just do what's right. They're not using the word integrity, but, how do we handle this situation? We've got, we're use an example of something we talked about already, but we have a situation where we don't have enough employees in Fargo, as an example. Maybe this didn't happen in Fargo, but use it as an example. And we're not going to be able to meet a commitment that we have coming up because we weren't able to make that pipe today for whatever reason. A machine went down, somebody didn't show up, whatever that might be. Well, how do we handle that with the customer? Who calls them? What do they tell them? Just do what's right. What's right. And those kind of things are really fun to watch our employees wrestle with them and then line them up against our values and then start living our values. And that creates a culture that's pretty hard to beat when that happens. So we're pretty excited about sharing our values, getting them in front of our employees, and then and then watching how they wrestle through them and how they use them and how they share them with, people down the line below them in the company. And we're actually, I'm not going to tell you what it is yet because I haven't told the company, but we're actually adding a fourth value this year. And we are going to also have a way to share our values with our employees that we're working on right now in another way, just to add. We talk about them a lot, but how do we also, is there other ways we can get them in front of
like a boots
our
on
employees
the
and
ground
their
value?
families? Yeah, and around role playing, and where they can role play with their employees and they can role play with their families. So maybe I'll share that with you.
Yeah, don't say any more. You're gonna
I won't. But if this,
you're like
if
little
you
kid
enjoy
excited
this,
again.
yeah, exactly. If you enjoy having me on your podcast, maybe a year from now I can share that and how it went. So
yeah, no, I normally do these in person, so I've called people up. People have called me. I'm really trying to do the video because you could see the chemistry. And I can't see a damn thing because I took my glasses off, but you look good with my glasses off, I'll tell you.
Yeah,
but sometimes I've interviewed, most people I've interviewed, it's went okay. Sometimes I'm usually working before this, so if I have a bad day trading, I feel like I don't do as good of a job.
Right.
But it's not as easy as you think, and that's why I look up to you, because I watch and listen to your podcast. There is a chance, and I know you have a crew back there filming, if by chance you see me disappear from the camera, that would just be that the battery ran out, but I think we'll make it. But don't anybody freak out. We'll just keep going, and we'll edit that part. I want you to talk about what you really thought you were coming on here to talk about. I seem to be good at dragging conversations either way, but I know you have some points you want to get across about water management, tile. You know how I feel about tile and farming. That if I'll just give the example that you and I talked about in private. When I first went up North Dakota, land was worth $3,000-$4,000. Say it cost $1,000 to tile. Nobody wanted to do that. All of a sudden, this ground traded for $8,000 the other day. So I really have a hard time listening to anyone with any ownership and any water problems telling me that they don't have the money to tile. And I happen to office at a bank in Mayville. I rent space from the good people at First State Bank in Mayville, and I know how much money's in the ag community, and we've seen what the government has done to help the ag community through the rough times of COVID, and even before that, the tariffs with China. So there's a lot of money, but wait, there's more. The grain markets are on their third year of a massive bull market, and grains closed on the dead high today. Corn, wheat, and beans closed on the dead high. Coming into the end of the year, 2022, things aren't good in ag. Things are great in ag right now. So tell us why we should be tiling.
Well, it's interesting. You said a lot there, and
that was just a question.
Yeah, I know. But the first thing I think of is, I started here at Prinsco 26 years ago, and land, that was $3,000 or $4,000 an acre. Well, you're talking about when you moved to North Dakota. I don't know when that was. When did you move to North Dakota?
7-8 years ago. I went up there in 14, 15.
That was 1,000 or less. I wasn't that familiar with North Dakota land, but 20, 30 years ago, it was in the $2,500 range here. And it was a challenge to get people to tile land that's, let's just say it's $1,000 an acre, and you're going to spend $700-800 an acre tiling the land. Well, why don't I just go buy more? Mm-hmm. That was the question that you got all the time, and that happened a lot. There's a lot of very large landowners all over the country, but North Dakota is one of the biggest. Where you can name, right here. If I asked you in the next 10 seconds, tell me 5 names of people that own more than 10,000 acres in North Dakota, and you would rattle them off. It wouldn't be hard.
Do a whole episode on it. I could start talking and not keep going for 15 minutes.
Right, and the reason for that is because that land was so cheap. And, what's happened just since, when you say we're in a bull market, but the last 3 years is, the farmers are making a lot of money. But when all the dust settles, they're going to look back and they're going to say, look at how much I have to spend, too. Look at all these inputs. Right. Look at what it's costing for seed and chemical, and what a combine costs now, and a 36-inch or 36-row planter or a corn head. All these things are unbelievably expensive and only going up, 10+% a year right now. In some cases, quite a bit more than that. And you're paying in North Dakota that $8,000 an acre. In Iowa, you're paying $24,000 an acre in some cases for land. Well, how do you get much more out of that land, out of each acre, out of each, if you're getting 200 plus bushels of corn an acre, how do I guarantee that's going to be consistent and maybe even push 300 or 350 at a time? And the only way you can do that right now, there might be some people that argue with what I just said.
These are your opinions.
When I say only, but
one of the ways.
One of the ways, but I'm going to say I like saying only.
I like it.
I like saying only is just to have your water management in order. And if you can, the old argument is, when do you need drainage more? When do you need, if say you're growing 200 bushel corn and that drainage is going to, you can get 225 out of it. Okay. Do you need that 225 when corn is 250 a bushel and you're barely making it? Do you need that extra $25 or 25 bushels an acre? Or do you need it when it's $7? Which one is better? You need it to survive, probably, when it's 250. But when corn is $7 and you're getting 200 bushels an acre, wouldn't it be pretty good for your operation to get that extra 25 bushels an acre at $7 a bushel? And what can you do with that over time? Can you get out of your operating loan completely? Can you, buy more land? Can you take that 25 bushels an acre over your 2,500 acre farm and say, we're gonna tile 500 acres next year and get that over another 500 acres? So I don't know the answer to that question of when do you need it more, but you need it, I think, in whatever the price of corn is. You have to have the proper drainage because you don't know what's going to happen with all these inputs and how that's going to challenge your operation going forward to continue to stay viable when this market goes back the other direction.
I like that answer. I'd like to add to that. Not to argue with you, but to enhance what you've already said, is one, in marketing, I want you to remember the 3 Bs. And I know I'm going to listen to one of your podcasts in a few weeks or months, and you're going to talk about bushels, bins, and basis, the 3 Bs. Without the bushel, you don't have anything. A bin sure helps, and it's important to understand that basis, and that bin ties into that basis. Now, you need the bushel. You need them at 250. You need them at 750. But if I could give anyone advice on why to tile, or if I could go back and be a student of history, why people don't plant crops. I mean, the market does its job, right? When markets are really low, for some reason, not as many acres in the world get planted. It's amazing how much less ground will get planted when people are losing hundreds of dollars per acre versus making hundreds of dollars per acre. But if I was a young, middle-aged farmer, successful, owned some ground in North Dakota or anywhere that we would say fringe, so fringe could be north, south, east, west. I'm sure your clients out west would be considered fringe acres. Is that a lot of the confidence that people have not to plant on the crop is based on federal crop insurance. And if and when those laws change, as we go another $1.7 trillion in the debt, I don't know that we'll always have the money in the farm bill to have federal crop insurance as lofty as it is now. And if there was ever a reason to get the water off your ground and want to plant a crop, it would be the fear of losing federal crop insurance. Because that backstop, that floor that the government gives you, you could give them that. And if you love your kids or grandkids, you say, you know what, there is so much of a better of a chance that we will get our crops in 2 weeks before our neighbor, and we'll get them out 2 weeks. We'll get them in 2 weeks for our neighbor, and we'll get them out 2 weeks before our neighbors get them out. And that, when you start getting up into like way up north in North Dakota, I mean, the northern counties are way different than Cass County, how they farm up there. It's like a whole nother state. That would be my fear. That would, if I sold tile, my sales pitch would be like, It's the ultimate insurance plan for your farm. How am I doing? You think I could sell anyone?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think,
But
you're,
it's true, right? Or
yeah,
if it's not
absolutely.
true, right into the show, right? Right into your show. I'll tell you how to get a hold of me. Flags, FLAGS at agbull.com. How do people get a hold of you if they don't think this is true and they think tile's the dumbest idea in the world? Jamie would like to hear from you.
Yeah, I sit and listen to you, and at the risk of sounding just like my father, I got to slam my wrist on the table and say I wished I was 10 years younger because, there's so much opportunity that's out there. Yeah, we have. You're not wrong. There's some risks coming. When does this change with our spending habits in our country? And it does feel like that will affect agriculture because only 2% of the population is in agriculture. It's probably for the rest of the populace, it's an easy place to cut. You see what's going on in places like the Netherlands right now, and there's some challenges in front of us, but there's also incredible opportunities. What agriculture can do with carbon and how we can sequester carbon so much cheaper than so many other ways to do that. There's a huge opportunity there. I don't think that's been sorted out in any way on how we make money on that and how, the individual farmer, how that gets all the way trickled down to that level. But it's exciting to me that there will be an opportunity there. But it all starts with, because things are going to change, and it starts with having your farm set up right so that you can take out whatever variables there are. You do your best to take them away. If you need pivot irrigators to add some water because you're in a climate or you have those types of soils, then you got to do that now because of how our country is moving, and the ability to do that, drill wells, those kind of things may not be there in the future. If you need to take water away, you got to do that now, because my theory on that, and again, I used the word only earlier, I'm going to say I'm right on this one, is when carbon comes and we want to have a lot of acres out there that are that have cover crops on them, you got to have your proper drainage in place, because if that ground isn't black in the spring, especially as you move north, especially as and we have more of these springs like we've had lately where they're wet, cold, long before we get to a warm, dry day. If that ground isn't black and tilled, it takes forever for it to dry out unless you have drainage in it. If you got your proper water management in place, you can have cover crops on there and you can still go in and plant it on a reasonable date. So there's another pitch for you, but we can go on and on about all these more minute practices that just go back to, well, if you're going to do that, that's a good idea, but you got to start with the basis of having your water managed.
So would you, if you met a farmer who was having a hard time getting crops in and out, would you ask them to farm less ground and immediately take better care of the ground that they have? Like, this sounds weird. You farm 3,000 acres, get down to 2,200, get the ground you own tiled, go in the bushel business, not the ego business at the bar of how big you farm. Because if you can't get it in and get it out, you could lose a lot of money. A smaller, more efficient farmer could absolutely run circles around you, correct?
Yeah, for sure. And to answer that question, I think I don't know that you can say that across the board, that every situation should be that way and you should just downsize. I think geography and what is the workforce look like where you live, all of that stuff plays into that. But there for sure is what you're saying there, and should be some farmers that should downsize, maybe sell a quarter, take that money and tile 3 or 4 quarters, and keep it going, because as we go here, there's going to be opportunities with conservation too, and tiling different ways than we have, whether it's denitrification wetlands, whether it's buffer strips, holding water back, all that's going to be an opportunity. But until we know a lot more about those. Some of those we know enough about, and people should be doing them already. There's no doubt in my mind that there isn't enough of that done, but that depends on your ground and your where you live, and there's a lot of dynamics that go into that. So getting done what you're able to do now is important.
Mm-hmm. What are you most excited about in your industry now that we're through the COVID, and assuming labor gets better and we're having a downturn in the stock market, we're going to have ups and downs in the grain market. I bet you if we did this podcast in a few years, it is not going to be as optimistic and lovey-dovey, everything's fine around the world when it comes to prices, that we will again overproduce bushels.
Mm-hmm. For sure. High prices are the cure for high prices. And I think what I'm most excited about is, even though everyone knew what drainage was 5 years ago, 15 years ago, and how important it was, it feels like this time around with this, what's happened the last 3 years in this market, that people are, it's become a necessity. Like, we are going to spend X number of dollars. Like, we bought 2 pickups a year for our farm. We're also gonna tile this much ground every year. We're gonna put a line item in our budget that's for tiling, and it's not because they have the money. They do have the money. That's part of it, but they're doing that also. I don't think that goes away when they have to start to say, okay, now we have to make choices on where we're spending the money. That will be one that is a necessity because they see the value for it, and they know that we absolutely have to have those bushels. We're in the bushel business. We have to have them. Now, is that true what I just said across the board and in some of the emerging markets? No, they're still learning that. But there are stories out there of what we just talked about guys saying, you know what, I'm not going to spend that $9,000 or that $14,000 an acre on buying that quarter, even though that quarter was, I've looked at it for 30 years, and that was going to be one that when it came for sale I was going to buy. It's just too high price when I can spend that money on managing what I already have and making it better.
I think that's what you and your wife talked about when you did do with what she does, tying in the real estate and land sales and what you do. That's an interesting dynamic. Real quick, I want to go back 15 minutes, talk about your son. When I travel through Texas, I noticed the same thing. And when I asked a local farmer down there just north of Waco, I said, what is with all these towns left in time? And he said the word cotton weevil. And I Googled cotton weevil. Is that right? Am I saying it right? The cotton weevil.
I don't know.
Want you to Google it.
Tell me the story.
You're not too old to learn. Google what
Okay.
the cotton weevil did to these towns in Texas. And what we need to do is make sure that whatever, too much or not enough water could, create disease. So that if I remember the story right, because I did Google it, the cotton weevil absolutely devastated the cotton crops in the 50s or 60s. But now I'm talked too much, and I don't want to spoil the ending. But those towns are the way they are because they once had something great, and it went away. And we need to make sure that doesn't happen to our customers. If we are in the risk management business, I think, Jamie, you and I are in the exact same business. I'm trying to set a floor through price. You're trying to set a floor of max production. So you're trying to get the bushels so we have them to market. I'm trying to make sure once the client has the bushel that the price doesn't go out from underneath them. And we're both in the insurance business, if you ask me.
Yep.
And the insurance guy is saying, what the heck do I do? I'm the real insurance guy. But I couldn't see how you couldn't look that you are selling insurance.
Yeah, for sure.
Insurance on future production.
I'd like to think that our business in my career yet evolves to what, you mentioned this briefly before, but where our farm programs actually are saying, we don't have the same money we had to throw at people. So we're going to incentivize them to do some of these practices where we know they're just going to make money long term. And this is a generational thing. Another reason why I love the business that I'm in is you tile a quarter or an 80 today, your grandkids are going to be benefactors of that. Not only your kids, your grandkids. So, we just finished up with Christmas, and how many presents did America get in which that's going to be old news. It's going to be broken. It's not going to be, usable in 3 months. A lot. And think of a tile system for your family. It's going to pay you back every year for generations. And there isn't a lot of things you can say about, a lot of things you can say in regards to that. What do you do for a living? Do you do something that's going to impact people positively and put money in their pocket for the next 100 years? I don't know.
Yeah, there's
not very
a lot of
many
people that can say that. Right. No, that's amazing. I'm out of questions, but I could keep talking to you for a long time. My biggest fear is that my battery's going to run out. I've never recorded.
Yeah, you're getting a little bit pixelated on the picture too, which you probably don't see. But
hopefully it comes out better than that. So
it's why I've gotten a little bit more dynamic and excited because I don't have to look at you.
But I think the way this records, it doesn't look so good. But then it should look and sound better when we get done. I will say this about the pandemic. If there was anything good that came out of the pandemic, and bad, some people are in their basement and never got out. I took my basement and said, I can own a media company. You took an office at your company and said, let's do it from where you are, and you're getting better and better. I do have a few more questions. With all the people you've interviewed, I know it's not me, so don't even tease me. You're up to what podcast at the water table? 71?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I think we're in the 65 range, I think, right now.
Of all the podcasts you did, I don't know that you plan a lot before you do them. You and I seem to be alike, where we get a piece of paper, write down 5 questions, just start having a conversation. That's what podcasts are. What's the one? Someone's never listened to the water table. They should go and listen to episode.
I'm not going to give you one because it's too hard for me. But
you're being a bad guest. You spit out a number.
Well, I'll say that early on, I did a podcast with Matt Helmers, one of the very first ones, Dr. Matt Helmers from Iowa State University. Talk a lot about the technical side of our industry and stuff. I think that's a good one for education. There's a guy early on, I did one with a customer, Todd Stanley from Gregla, Minnesota, way up north, and just a fascinating individual. That was fun for me. Eric Snodgrass, a meteorologist professor from Illinois, University of Illinois. That was a really good one that I did here more recently this year. So I can't give you just one. One of my this is more personal, but I did one with Kerry Howell, who is a friend of mine from Canada, and it talked about his career and moving from England to Canada and how he spanned 40-year career in sales of plastic pipe and how he did business all over the world doing that. Pretty fun conversation for me to have. Doing the podcast with my wife was fun to hear her passions for agriculture and not even really realizing before we had that conversation how our careers kind of collide, and how we have a lot of the same passions when it comes to our careers. So that was fun. There isn't very many that I've said, when I'm done with that, boy, that was a 45 minutes of wasted time. But those would give you a half a dozen that, if people want to listen to them, go right ahead. I'm going to turn the tables and ask you a question. I asked you this a week ago, did you have time to listen to
yes is the answer. I'm on episode 3. Okay.
Of Escaping 1980 for
and if I look thinner, it's because every episode that I go to Planet Fitness, I have to listen to something when I'm walking on that treadmill on an incline. And
so for the Egg Bowl listeners, the Escaping 1980
for the Daddy
is
Gang, if we were call her Daddy for the Daddy Gang, the Egg Bowl gang.
Yeah, I put Tommy onto this podcast, and it's really a good. For those of you that are our age or younger, 50 or younger, that don't remember what happened in the 70s and 60s in agriculture, which was really robust and great time to be in agriculture, but then how that changed in the 80s.
Dr. Butts is name dropped in there. Can I tell you something interesting about that podcast, James? Is that it was filmed before the average land auction in Iowa was going for 10 or 11 or 12. It was filmed when people were staying home for COVID. I think the dates on it are like November of 20, so you start COVID in March of 20, you go around the calendar. We're 6 months into COVID. land prices have exploded since that
Yep.
podcast was released. And I think what that group does down there out of like Lafayette, Indiana, is this was like a 6 or 7 podcast series. I'm on episode 3. But I actually think when we get off this podcast, I'm going to put on my headphones and go to Planet Fitness and listen to another one, because you can't understand what's going to happen in the future if you don't go back and study history. And I will quote a line from that podcast that I'm going to use a lot on the winter speaking circuit. And let me think about how it was said. It went that, I'm going to say it wrong, but let me think about it. Like, unfortunately in life, they give you the test first, and then you get to see how you did later or something. Like, it was like, you don't get to learn it and not make the mistake. The test comes first, and then the consequences are later. I'm saying it wrong, but it was a great quote. When I heard it, I texted it to myself, and the person they quoted, I'll have to use that. And there was another thing too. But what's so interesting about this podcast is they're talking about the land boom bust cycle as if it was happening 18 months ago. And we haven't seen nothing yet. And we're coming off a stock market that's watched Tesla lose 3/4 of its value here in the last 9 months. There's no reason, if you and I were recording in a few years, that land that sold for 16 grand couldn't be back to 8 or 9 grand. If history repeats itself, that's possible. But when you talk about water and water restriction and not as much land to farm in America, maybe that is what gives land its value, as dollar stores are being built and that land will never be back in production agriculture. Or South Fargo being built. That was beautiful dirt in South Fargo.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'll never go back to farming. So, yes, thank you for bringing up that podcast.
So that leads me to one other question.
Yeah.
Do you listen to your own podcast?
Embarrassingly enough, sometimes. Sometimes I've done so poorly, and my worst critic is upstairs right now, Gina G. I make her listen to them, and sometimes when my kids are in the car with us, I put them on. I'm like, you should listen to this. This is so great. And they're like, Dad, shut that off. I do. It kills me and pains me to listen to myself and the silly things I say and the smart-ass remarks that come out of my mouth. And Gina will be like, you checked your phone while you're recording? I was like, well, I short crude oil. I had to cover it before the close. And, but it's not live. It could be edited. Yeah, I listen to it just to do a better job. And I listen to a lot of other ag podcasts. My favorite thing to do is what you and I did the other day. Give me a name of a podcast to listen to. And you turned me on to something so great that I actually sent them an email, joined their list. They're interesting. But again, if someone goes and listens, what's the name of it? It's something 1980.
Escaping
1980. In that podcast, they're making it seem like the land bubble's happening then. Interest rates, I'll give you a statistic. A year ago today, the 10-year note was at like 1.60, and now it's at 3.80. So none of what they were none of what's happened here in the last year is in that podcast. And that's why it's so important, I think, folks go back and listen to it, because they need to restart that podcast for another 5 or 6 series and say, okay, this is what happened in 2022. This is what happens when you introduce $4 trillion in the American economy, tell everyone to stay home on their doofus and watch Netflix. Stuff doesn't get made. Things don't get done. And the government gave you money to do it because it was said to be the right thing to do. Not only did that happen in America, but it happened all over the world. And that, we just came through one of the greatest financial experiments ever. Some people say we came through one of the greatest scientific experiments, but financially, what we've done, I don't think we could ever handle doing again. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, Tommy, I've enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me to join your podcast, and we probably need to do this more often.
That would be good. I would like
about.
to join you in your studio. Hopefully you can join me in my studio. Of course, I have this here, or we can just throw up the cameras and do it together. So, again, this is Jamie from The Water Table. I think you guys should check it out with Prinsco, and it's on my website of my top 5 podcasts to listen to. So thank you for joining the show. We'll do it again. And, of course, how do people get a hold of you, James?
Oh, man, they can find me on our website at Prinsco. They can email me, Jamie, Jamied, Jamie D at Prinsco.com. I'll give you my cell phone on the podcast. I saw it's 320-212-9380. Go ahead and call me if you want. But I saw Dan Cathy one time, who's the CEO, former CEO now, but owner of Chick-fil-A, and watched him at a leadership conference. He gave out his cell phone to 5,000 people there and said, if you ever have a question, text me. Don't call me because I won't answer, but I will answer your text. So I thought, this guy's full of crap, and I texted him, and guess what? I got a response.
You know what I always tell people my cell phone is? 8675309.
Probably is, knowing you.
No. But it would be a doozy if it was. I bet you Jenny would answer.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking that you'd probably have to pay big money to get that.
8675309.
Yeah.
There's 3 generations have no clue what we're talking about. But we're going to keep this conversation going. Thank you. Thanks for the crew behind you. I know there's a bunch of people helping you. Of course, I'm down here by myself, and but it was fun, and we'll do it again. And
Thanks,
as I
Tom.
always
Have a
end the
great
show,
day.
my name's Tommy Grisafi, and I'm Bullish Agriculture. Thanks, everyone.